Okay, I'm going to introduce our keynote now. We're really excited to have our keynote speaker today for our September Emergency Preparedness Month, and it's fitting that we have Brea's own Emergency Preparedness Coordinator, Lisa Keyworth, with us today. Lisa has been in the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator for Brea for the last 9 years. She works closely with the first responders, other cities, counties, and the state when there are any emergencies or disasters. Lisa also runs the CERT program for Brea. She just celebrated 25 years in public safety. Prior to working for Brea, she was a police dispatcher for 16 and a half years. 11 of those years as a supervisor. You don't look old enough for any of this.
I wish that was true.
Lisa holds a bachelor's degree in poli-sci from Cal Poly Pomona. Her entire family is in law enforcement, so public service runs deep in her family. Will you help me welcome Lisa Keyworth?
Thank you, Lacey, and thank you, everybody, for having me. Hopefully you'll learn at least one thing out of my presentation, and if so, I've been successful. So why am I here? Like Lacey said, it's National Preparedness Month. For the last 2 decades, they've dedicated the month of September as National Preparedness Month. Every year has a theme, so this year's theme is Preparedness Starts at Home. Granted, this is the chamber breakfast. We're going to be focusing more on business, churches, schools, and what you can do to prepare. However, at the end, we're going to talk about what you as a family at home can also do to prepare yourselves for any type of disaster. Okay? Why do I do this and why is this important? Okay, we talk about resiliency after any type of disaster, any type of emergency, any type of trauma. And a prepared community is a more resilient community. So if you know what you should do before, during, and after a disaster, our community is more likely to be resilient and find what our new normal is. So this is how this is gonna go. I wanna talk to you guys about the different stages. You're gonna get a mini Emergency Management 101 class, okay? There's 4 stages of emergency preparedness, okay? They can start at any one of these levels and it's just a constant cycle. So mitigation is our first one. We can't stop disasters from happening, but how do we lessen the impact to your business, to the schools, to your home, to your community? What does that look like? Okay, for businesses, do you have a continuity of operations plan? What happens if the world falls apart tomorrow? Do you have a written plan? What happens when your employees can't come to work? What happens when your data systems are impacted? What happens if there's a supply chain issue? You should have all those things written out. If Lacey, if you're not available for the chamber, who's your next in line of who's going to take control and make sure that the business keeps running? Documentation of all your critical infrastructure, your inventory. Okay, budgets. Do you have budget for any type of disaster recovery? If we take this one step further, we'll talk about if there's a disaster, what can you do to lessen the impact? Is it securing your building? Nobody wants to talk about active shooters. It's reality these days. The mitigation could be, improving the building structure if it's something for an earthquake to make sure that it's earthquake compliant. What if it's something like an active shooter or an aggressive person? Do you have access controls at your business in order to prevent that type of thing from happening? Those are mitigation efforts. You can't stop it from happening, but what can I do to lessen the impact when or if it does happen? There's actually small business administration loans that are out there that are possible to fund mitigation activities at your businesses that are worth looking into if that's something that you find to be useful. Our next step is preparedness. Okay, that's the crux of what we're doing here, but without mitigation, without the response, without the recovery, preparedness is somewhat useless, right? So they all go hand in hand. So for businesses, risk assessments of your facilities. Have you done that? Do you have emergency plans in place? Daisy and I were just talking before the meeting. Do you know that OSHA requires businesses to have a written emergency action plan? Pretty easy standard of if you're supposed to have one. If you have a fire extinguisher in your building, accessible to you, or if you have to evacuate during any type of fire or emergency, you're required to have an action plan. Okay, written if it's more than 10 employees, less than 10 employees, it can be a verbal plan that's discussed with them. But in that plan, it should have means of reporting fires and other emergencies. Is there alarm systems in your building? Evacuation and escape routes. Accounting for personnel. What does that look like when you've all left the building? How do you account for all your personnel? Emergency contact list, police, fire, staff, your utilities, anything else that you need written down. You need a template. There's stuff on the OSHA website. But every single business, church, I know the schools, I reached out to Rick, that the schools each have a written emergency plan. And if you have an emergency plan, even the churches, I know a couple of the local churches, I've seen their plans as well. Did you train your staff on it? Not just write a plan and say, yep, we have one, it's over there when we're ready. You need to train on your plan of what's in it, and you need to practice your plan. So if you guys have a drill, perfect example, it's National Preparedness Month, but next month is when the Great Shakeout hits. Pardon the pun. October 16th at 10:16 in the morning, we drop, cover, and hold on in the Civic Center. We wait and we pretend like people are checking for damage, and then we do a full Civic Center evacuation. This year, we're also including the Senior Center and the City Yard are also going to be participating. Just for that practicing. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do per the plan, they've read it, but what actually happens when you have to practice that plan? Okay, preparedness is also in your businesses, churches, schools, having an emergency kit. That kit, you guys talked about first aid kits. First thing that comes to mind is, please, nothing against Walmart. Don't go to Walmart and buy a first aid kit that's 400 pieces and 395 are Band-Aids. Okay, look up what should be in an effective first aid kit where it's not just your basic Band-Aids. But having all those supplies, training on them, and knowing where they are, when to access them. If you guys have evacuations, part of that plan and part of the preparedness is who is authorized to order an evacuation from your business, from your school, and under what conditions would you do that? Okay, so that's preparedness. Our next one's response. So response is once the disaster or emergency happens, it's putting that plan into play. What type of resources do you have available? That's something you should know ahead of time, and putting all of those into play. We're focusing on businesses, churches, schools right now. However, I'm going to go to the other side of this here shortly of what the city is doing in all of these different efforts to know how we're supporting our community as well. So your emergency response plan goes into play, implementing it. It needs to be flexible. Things change. We have written plans for everything, but you need to have the flexibility of, hey, we were going to use that exit, now we can't. What's our backup plan? It needs to be flexible. It needs to have alternative ideas in there for if what you had planned doesn't work the way you expected it to. The final section of our emergency management, our process here is recovery. Okay, recovery is once the disaster is over, how do we put our programs back in place? How do we get back to, it's not going to be the same as it was. What's the new normal? COVID was a unique experience, but we use it because it impacted so many of us and for so long. Think about the Chamber's a good example. We worked really closely with the Chamber during COVID for donations management, distribution of different supplies. But the recovery piece, some businesses were unable to recover. So what does that recovery look like? You can look at the LA fires right now. Looking at people with that includes your debris removal, rebuilding. What does that look like? It may not look the same, but in your planning, you need to plan for what that recovery looks like. The city does that, we'll talk about that a little bit. But that's what the stage is. Now, if we start talking about the city side of this, what's the city doing, okay? Part of what my job is, there's a lot of different aspects to my job, but one of them is we have our emergency operations plan. I'm actually in the middle of a complete rewrite right now that hopefully will be going to council by the end of the year. But that's basically our disaster Bible. People have read it, people have looked at it, we train on it. But what it is if a disaster happens right now, we go to that book. And in that book is roles and responsibilities for pretty much every position in our emergency operations center. So someone was asking me before the meeting, what do you do if there's a major earthquake? What's the plan? Well, the plan is our emergency operations center would activate. We all come in a room, all the players know their role, they know what their responsibilities are. We start getting information from the field, we start making a list, we prioritize, we set objectives, we get resources, we get everything that we need in order to respond to that disaster and serve the public in whatever priority of needs that they have. We have a hazard mitigation plan. Just like I talked about mitigation for your businesses, we have a written hazard mitigation plan. Our first ever was approved by FEMA and Cal OES last year, and it spells out what hazards is the city faced with, and what can we do to lessen the impact. So wildfire is a concern of ours. So some of that is doing weed abatement, some of that's doing brush clearance. Those are the mitigating factors that we can lessen the impact. We can't stop the fires, but we can lessen the impact. If flooding was a concern for the city of Brea, it's the infrastructure, making sure our storm drain system is able to accommodate the amount of water that might be produced for a flood. So those are the mitigating things that we do, but it's all spelled out for us. And same thing, we can get grants through FEMA in order to fund some of these mitigating efforts in order to make the city better prepared for those disasters. I mentioned the Emergency Operations Center, the middle picture on the top picture in in the middle over there, that was our drill a few months ago in our emergency operations center. We don't control the incident from the emergency operations center, but we work with the field and we work with getting resources. So an example is we have a wildfire out in Carbon Canyon. The field says we need to do an evacuation of this neighborhood. The emergency operations center says, okay, this is the evacuation zone. How many personnel do you need to do it? What else do you need to support that? We get them the personnel they need, we send them out there. We don't tell them how to do it, the field does that, but we support that. We're evacuating, okay, well, I determine I need to set up shelters if I'm doing evacuations. I work with my shelter group. They're well trained in how to set up a shelter. And there's all these moving parts. Hey, public information officer, we're setting up a shelter, we're doing these evacuations. Can you do the notifications to the public on what that looks like? So it's a big coordinated effort for us. Everybody knows their role. Everybody knows what they're supposed to do and how to interact with each other on making sure that the disaster runs smoothly, but if you know what I mean, to kind of get all the moving parts together on the same page. We set major objectives and goals for getting there. For any type of disaster, we set timelines for having different things ready. But that's all coordinated in our emergency operations center. We actually have a training coming up in November, and we're focusing on our shelter plan. If you guys don't know, every city has a set shelter location that we have a contract with the American Red Cross. Ours is the Brea Community Center, so if we order an evacuation, as long as the building is safe, we evacuate to the community center. We have community center staff, we have some of my CERT volunteers that have been trained through the Red Cross for shelter fundamentals, so they can set up a shelter with or without the American Red Cross support to accommodate 120 people with feeding, with a dormitory, with everything that they need. So our EOC training in November is going to focus on the newly written shelter plan. So everybody in the EOC understands it's not just community services doing it. Police have a role, fire has a role, public works has a role. What does that look like? So if we have a disaster, everybody is on the same page of what they're supposed to do and when they're supposed to do it. Mutual aid. This is a big piece. So that was the other conversation about if we had an earthquake right now. That bottom right corner picture, we call that the solar. We have what's called the solar program or solar plan. It's it's the letters San Bernardino, Orange, LA County, and Riverside County fire agencies get together once a month or quarterly. They train. You know, we learned from the Freeway Complex fire out in Chino Hills, Brea, Yorba Linda, back in 2008. That coordination was a huge piece of it, right? So what they did was they meet every quarter, and if there's anything in that section of the city that impacts one of our cities, all the agencies are trained to come together, and they explain it a good way. You get to a fire, you don't say, who are you? You say, how are you? Because you've trained together, you've been around together. They have spelled out communications plans on what frequencies they're gonna use, all that type of stuff. But somebody asked about that earthquake. Okay, if we have a major disaster in Brea and Brea only, the world's coming. We're getting La Habra, we're getting Yorba Linda, we're getting the sheriffs, we're getting everybody. If we have a major earthquake here in Brea, you think it just stopped at our city boundaries? So the point of coming out and getting the community prepared is just that. If you're better prepared, it makes my job easier because we know we don't have to worry about our residents because they're better prepared to be able to take care of themselves until we're in a position where we can come out and help. Public education, we're here doing that. Training, and then our alert and warning. I don't know how many of you actually live in Brea, but if you're not registered for Alert OC, it's our mass notification system. If you are, you should have got my voice last Thursday morning saying good morning, it's only a test. But that's how anywhere in the Orange County, that's how you're gonna be notified during a disaster. This is your biggest part of Emergency Management 101. In all these things that we do at the city, we use something that's called the Incident Command System. And what that is back in the 70s during a bunch of wildfires in Southern California, they realized all these agencies coming together, too many chiefs, too little Indians, and they didn't work well together in coordination, resource management, and all those things. So the fire service were the start of this. Blair can attest to this. ICS came about because they said we need a better way of resource management. We need a better way of managing these incidents. So they came up with this ICS system. And then fast forward to 1991, the Oakland Bay Hills fire. Fire agencies from all over came to this massive wildfire, and they found out that the hose couplings on the rigs didn't match up with the fire hydrants that were out there. So they didn't have any communication to talk to each other. And so what happened was the state of California said, wait, we need a standardized system for if we have a major emergency to make sure all the resources are exactly the same. So the state basically stole ICS that the fire service came up with, renamed it as our standardized emergency management system. But what that does is, you guys hear about strike teams going out on fires. Strike teams are 5 of the same exact item. So if it's a type 3, it's the big off-road fire engine. They're all equipped exactly the same way. So if you call and ask for a type 3 strike team, you're going to get the same thing every single time. So it made sure that there was that consistency when you're ordering resources. It's common terminology, where I was talking to somebody at the office yesterday talking about a cog and a coop and a this, and I'm like, what is all that stuff? I broke my own rule. You use common terminology, because you may have somebody from Northern California and a certain code you use or a word you use means something differently, okay? And then the nation says, hey, they might be onto something. It actually came about after 9/11. A few years later, they realized that not just the common terminology and all this other stuff, what happens when the feds, the state, the local, and the nonprofits and the private sector all come together? They weren't coordinating well, and that was a huge problem after 9/11. So the same program as ICS and SIMS that we have in California, the nation adopted the same thing in 2004 and said, now it's a national standard. These are the different things that we're gonna focus on. And now the city has been part of NIM since 2006, and it's now a requirement for us after a disaster in order to get reimbursed. We have to actually fall within that same system in order for us to get reimbursed. So all these things we do, all the plans, the EOC, the field operations, all fall under the same umbrella, so that if our Brea guys ended up going to Torrance, they all speak the same language, they all have the same equipment, they all manage the resources better. And so that's where a lot of that came about. Okay, that means my time's up. But that's what the city is doing, okay? So your basic preparedness, this is the stuff just to take home with you, okay? Know your risks. You may not all live in Brea, but I'll tell you right now, Brea is wildfires, it's earthquakes, man-made disasters are probably our top 3. But wherever you live, what is that risk, and how are you gonna protect yourself and your family from that risk? Build a kit. You should be self-sufficient at least 72 hours. If we ask for help from the county, it should be pretty quick. The state might take a few days. If we get stuff from the feds, it's gonna be a couple weeks before we see anything. So make sure you're self-sufficient. Food, water, first aid, medications, okay, those types of things. Make a plan. Just like your business, you should have a plan at home. What happens if there's a disaster and you're not home? Where are you gonna meet your family? If your kids are in school, what's your meetup place? What does that look like? Stay informed. We talked about Alert OC. If anybody wants homework, go to alertoc.gov, sign up by your address, your text, your email, and get involved. My final little plug here is Lacey mentioned our CERT program. We have our Community Emergency Response Team program. It's a 20-hour free FEMA-sponsored training program. We open it to usually Brea residents, but we can open it also to those that work in Brea. It's basic preparedness. We go through some basic first aid, how to actually use a fire extinguisher with live fire. We go through some of that incident management stuff. We do light search and rescue. It's actually a really awesome opportunity. Daisy's been through the class. But it'll be offered again in March, like I said, completely free. You can go through the program and stay a volunteer and be activated during an emergency, or you can take it and say, great, appreciate the information, and take it with you and do good for your neighbors. But that's all I have. So thank you for your time. I hope you at least picked up one nugget, if nothing else. And in the back, there's some flyers. There's one for building a basic preparedness kit if you need help with that. There's one on if you need to evacuate, what you should take with you. And then finally, one of the most important things is preparing for your pet. A lot of people won't evacuate if they can't take their pet with them, so there's a whole sheet on how to prepare your pets for disasters as well. So, thank you.
Okay, wait.
Whoa.
I have a
Gender,
question,
no
and I
questions
think
from
there's
both of
probably some others. You mentioned other cities coming in for mutual aid. From a financial perspective, does the city of Brea pay for all those resources, or does the city pay when they go somewhere else? How does that work, the finances of it?
So for actual mutual aid for police and fire, it's actually a California Master Mutual Aid Agreement to where they don't have to pay for it. So if we have not contract, but an agreement where they will all come to the city on their own city's dime in order to provide that mutual aid.
Okay.
For something like we were talking about the strike teams going on wildfires, They actually get reimbursed by either Cal OES if it's a state level fire, or the feds if it's the Forest Service.
Okay.
So when we send our strike teams out, it's basically for pay. So they'll go out and then we do all the documentation, and when they come back, we'll get a check from either Cal OES or the state. But the local level, it's all part of Master Mutual Aid Agreement to where it's at no cost to the city.
Okay, that's great. Jatinder, did you have a question?
When is the next cert?
March. I don't have exact dates yet, but it'll be in March.
We had a fire not too long ago on the 57 freeway, and we initiated solar then.
Yep.
Maybe you want to share that a little bit and see how that.
Yeah, it was actually the day before 4th of July. July 3rd, we got a report of a brush fire just off the 57 freeway, just west of the high school. And instead of just sending Brea, because technically it's the city of Brea, what happened is we got a full response from Brea, we got a full response from LA County, we got a full response from Orange County. And what that does is it dumps a lot of resources on a fire to make sure we knock it out really quickly. So that solar plant isn't just, oh, we're gonna help you, this is what we're sending. We're gonna send you this many helicopters, we're gonna send you this many fixed wing, we're gonna send you this many engines. We're gonna send you, a water tender, which is a big truck of water. We're gonna send you a hand crew to go cut the line with shovels. All that's pre-designated, and the whole intent of that is that fire was out pretty quickly, and we protected the high school, we protected El Torito and the other stuff up there. And so the whole point of that is we dump as many resources as we can on any fire in that mutual threat zone. Because if that fire took off in any direction, it would impact Diamond Bar. If it went the other way, it could impact Mojave. It goes all the way around. And so that solar plan got implemented for that fire with full response from 3 different agencies.
Are there drones in the solar plan that help you, like goes here and they send like
No,
that?
the problem with that is that if we have helicopters up, we will not put drones up.
True.
So if you always say if you fly, we can't. So the fire departments do have drones where if it's a wildland fire further out and we're not using aircraft, they will send drones out.
Cool.
What we'll usually use those for is pre-planning, or after the fire's out, they'll fly the drone for hotspots.
Yeah.
So if it's a rugged terrain, they can go back and check for heat sensors or any flare-ups, but typically on that type of thing, we don't send drones out.
We had a couple aerial, I think two helicopters and a fixed wing, so yeah, no drones
Nice.
on that one.
Got
But
it.
we snuffed it out pretty quick,
Makes
and
sense.
all because we had these agreements in place.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
This is more of a note for anyone, for kids with drones. When there's an active fire or anything like that, if they mandate you can't operate a drone unless you have specific federal clearance to do it. There's a lot of videos about the fire on 57 that were not city or state sanctioned. They were people flying their drones. Try to encourage people not to do that. It is dangerous. If they hit a helicopter, it can just be really bad. So
Wow.
just adding that in, it's really dangerous.
They had one at the LA fire, up at the LA fires back in January. They had a drone crash into one of their super scoopers. That guy's actually found guilty and going to be serving time. So it's a huge problem. Go ahead, Connie.
Just a plug for emergency kits. Actually, a couple years ago for Christmas, we gave all our adult kids, I have 5 kids, a really nice emergency kit. It might have seemed boring as a gift, Christmas gift, but it was actually really cool that we put our own things, and they've used it here and there. And it's not just full of Band-Aids, it's got some really, really important things in there too. So,
It's a nice Band-Aid.
yeah, they're really
They're
nice.
good
Band-Aids.
Anybody else? No? Well,
Can I
thank you.
plug CERT?
You can plug CERT.
I've been a CERT member since 2013, 2016, something like that, so it's been a long time. Go through the program. It is a wonderful program. I live in Brea, we're split up by neighborhood. right?
Yes.
So I live in Olinda Ranch. If there's an emergency, all of us CERT members in the neighborhoods go into the park, right? And we all know what to do in an emergency like that so that we can help before the first responders actually get there. So be a part of it. Whatever city you live in, they have their own CERT program, most of them. Really, go through the training, just be a part of it. It's really cool.
Sounds awesome.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Thanks for your service, appreciate it. Sometimes the people that aren't out there on the scene don't get the appreciation, but you really help them be prepared.
Thank you.
I say that my son just started a new job in Washington, D.C. He's a government correspondent for the National Safety Council.
Oh, wow.
So I'm learning that we even had one. So we're excited. Great job.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lisa.